So let's just get started straight away. So we know from research that networks play a very important role in labor market outcomes. So usually you rely on friends and families to help you find a job, right? And actually research has actually shown that the stronger your networks, the better labor market outcomes you tend to have. So you tend to have higher earnings. So if you know people the right place. And there's a very big literature in both developing and developed countries that estimate the effect of these networks on various outcomes like wages and education. One special type of social network is political connections. So we know from many talks that people who have political connections tend to have better labor market outcomes. We find them employed in better jobs. But there's really not enough empirical evidence on this in this regard. So I've only come across about 2 papers that try to empirically estimate the effect of political connections on labor market outcomes. On the other hand, there's a much larger literature looking at the effect of political connections on firms. So this research was actually inspired by a paper written by Raymond Fisman back in 2001, where he looked at the effect of then President Suharto's health news on a market value of Indonesian connected firms. And that's found a large literature looking at how firm outcomes are affected by having political connections. But still there is not much research done on looking at the effect on labor market outcomes for individuals. And this is the research gap that this paper tries to fill. So there are a couple of issues to think about when we're trying to answer this question. First one is the definition of political connection. So if we just look at the observational data, it's very hard to figure out who is politically connected and who is not. Right? So that's one issue. The other main issue is that of indigeneity. So we can think of 2 ways in which political connections might have an impact on observed earnings. Right? So one channel is through the classic network effect. So if you know someone who's in the right place with political power, then that person might have better information about where the jobs are located, right, and where the well-paying jobs are available, and they might be able to pass the information, and that's why we see that those connected individuals have better outcomes. Actually, political connection is a special case of networks because there's an element of political power as well. So it could be that politically connected individuals get access to nepotistic referrals, and so they can get access to jobs that might not easily be available to unconnected individuals. Right? This is especially true in the case of in countries where there is a large state sector, and access to those state sector jobs require you to know someone in the right places. There's also a possibility that in case of private firms, the political individuals might have a reciprocal relationship with the firms, and therefore, if you know someone who has political power, then they might be able to refer you to private firms that pay well. Right, so that's the direct labor market effect of political connections. But we also have to think about other ways where political connected individuals who are politically connected might be different from those who are not connected. And one is through human capital investment. And so we might find that individuals who are politically connected might invest in different kinds of human capital, not all of which are observed in the data. And if you just look at the relationship between political connection and labor market outcomes, we might be picking up the effects of these human capital investment that were made during childhood, for example. And it would be ideal to separate the 2 effects if we want to understand how the labor market institutions actually are functioning, right? And if we want to know whether there's segmentation in the labor market on the basis of political connections, or if there are inefficiencies in the labor market, then we want to separate out the effect of this nepotistic behavior from the effect of differences in human capital investment. And that's the goal of this paper. So just to discuss a couple of papers that try to do this, we have one paper by Gagliardoshi and Manatoda in Italy, and the other one is by Papchans and Labor in the context of the Philippines. So there are two main questions. So how do we define political connections? Right. So in both of these papers, they use naming conventions that are specific to this particular context, where having the same last name as a person with political power gives you some proxy for whether you're not connected. So, and this is specific to this context where names can be used to figure out who is related to whom. They have slightly different research designs. So the paper by Gagliardoshi and Mankoda, they use a panel data on individuals. So they observe individuals over time, and they look at the timing of the office holding of the relatives. So if your relatives were holding office, does it have a positive effect on your earnings, for example? And they do find an effect of about 16%. So if your relative was in the office, then your earnings goes up by 16%. The other paper in the context of Philippines by Papchans and Labor, they use a regression discontinuity design. So what they basically do is they look at narrow elections, and if your relative narrowly won an election and became politically powerful, then does that have a positive effect on your own labor market outcomes compared to those who are related to individuals who narrowly lost the election. And they also find that there is a positive employment effect, so you're more likely to be employed in managerial jobs, which pay higher salaries if your relative narrowly won the election. And these results are mostly driven by employment in the public sector. So these are pretty like pushing that I mentioned earlier. But these are the only two papers that I found so far that try to answer this question directly. And the research that I do actually is slightly different from these papers. So in this paper that I'm presenting today, so I use household survey data from Indonesia, the Indonesian Family Life Survey. And one advantage this data set has is that it has a lot of rich background characteristics that can be used to control for a variety of factors. Whereas the other two papers, they mostly use administrative data, which tend to be not that rich in terms of background variables. The definition that I use for political connection is having a government employee as one of family members. And I'll discuss this definition in more detail later, but basically so in the literature, mostly look at elected officials, but since bureaucrats are more numerous, and we tend to pick up more people who are politically connected in this paper. And then, in order to look at the actual causal estimate of political connections, I explore the variation in political connection that might have been that was generated by Indonesia's transition to democracy, and we'll discuss these 2 points in greater detail shortly. So just before that, just to give you an overview of the findings, the main result that I find is that political connection increases your monthly income by about 45%. So this is a much larger effect than what has been found in the literature so far. And some part of this effect does come from greater human capital investment. So politically connected individuals do tend to invest differently in human capital than unconnected individuals, and that drives some of the results. And this is a strong evidence for segmentation in the labor market, where an individual with the same amount of skills might actually end up earning more in the labor market if you know someone in the right place. So let's to think about what are the possible implications of the results. So it provides a better understanding of networks effects, right, related to specifically to political connections. So most of the current research has been done on social networks, like caste membership or knowing people from your own village. But okay, like I said, there hasn't been much done on the role of political networks. The other issue to think about is that if there is this political connection effect, then it might have an effect on your incentive to acquire human capital, right? So if there are jobs, if there are jobs that can only be accessed by certain fraction of individuals in the country, then individuals who can't access those jobs might decide not to invest in the human capital that are necessary for those kind of jobs. Right? And that has implications for socio-economic mobility. Right? The poor tend to have less political connection than the rich. And we also we understand much better the legacy of the authoritarian past through this research. So let's get into the details of how I try to estimate the results that I just described. So let's think of a simple two-period theoretical model where in the first period, individuals decide on how much human capital invest in. And then in the second period, they go to the labor market and earn rewards on the human capital. So we can think of two types of human capital. One is denoted by E, which is the observable human capital, for example, education, right? So how many years of education that you obtain. And then right, other unobservable human capital, like it's denoted by theta in this case. So it will think of like non-cognitive skills, social skills, things like that might be rewarded in the labor market, but you can't really observe from the data. Right? And there's a function f that takes into account like the political connection as well as other variables, other background variables, and decide on how much of the investment to make. Right? So. And in the second period, then we have an earnings functions that determine according to this equation here. So we have y as, let's say, earnings, and there might be some effect of the political connection p, which alpha is the estimate. Then we have the effect of the observed human capital, right, education, and then we have some background variables. Then there is this unobserved human capital aspect, theta. And then there's some allocation effect, J, and then there's a random error. So this kind of highlights the issue that I was talking about here. So if we don't know anything about theta, so we don't have information on theta, so if we just run a regression with some outcome variable and political connection variable, then we might still estimate the positive effect of alpha, even if alpha is 0 in reality, because of this positive correlation between theta and this p, right? So we might pick up the effect of this unobserved human capital and thus biasing the estimate of alpha that we have, and therefore in order to really find what the true value of alpha is, we need to somehow take into account the effect of theta. Right? So that's the main challenge, main empirical challenge in this research. And if you're prepared to make some assumptions on how the world works, then we might be able to answer this question. So let's say we assume that all the investments in human capital happens in the first part of your life. So like in your teen years, in your early childhood is when you make all the human capital decisions, right? And then there is some exogenous shock to the political connection of your political connection. That happened after you have made all the necessary decisions about human capital. And then if that happens, then you can use that variation in the political connection after making all the human capital decisions in order to estimate the value of alpha unbiasedly. Right? And I was looking at the literature and looking at some context that might be where this strategy might be applicable, and I think the democratization in Indonesia provides a very good context in order to do that, to implement this strategy. So here's the main context-specific information. So there are two observations to make. One, the definition of political connection using observation data. So my definition of political connection is if you're living in a household where who the government employed in 1993, and I use 1993 because that's the first year of the Indonesian family life survey data that I use for this research. So why might this be a good definition of political connection in the context of Indonesia? So we know that before 1999, Indonesia had was governed by a deputy regime of President Suharto and his Golkar party. Right? And this party had all the political power before democratization. And because the party relied on patronage and nationalistic behavior to obtain to maintain political power, and since bureaucracy was one of the most was the easiest ways to engage in this rent-seeking behavior. So one way to reward individuals who are loyal to you is by offering them government employment. So in that sense, government employment is we can argue that government employees were more likely to be politically related to Golkar or at least loyal to Golkar than non-government employees. So this is not a perfect measure of political connection. Obviously, some government employees were not connected to Golkar; they probably had nothing to do with Golkar. Whereas some non-government employees probably had connections to the Golkar party. But I'll argue that it actually doesn't matter. That this is not a perfect measure, as long as that relationship is not systematically different across different districts. Okay? So as long as this is a proxy of political connection that does not vary across districts, then we should be okay. And we'll discuss that more in a little bit. So that's the definition of political connection that I use from my data. And then how do I get the variation that's needed for identifying the effect of political connection? So if you look at the 1999 election data, there are some districts where Golkar won the election, right? So it was the highest vote getter in 1999, and there are other districts where Golkar did not do so well, right? And Indonesia also embarked in a decentralization process where most of the power was devolved to the district level, right? So if Golkar won at the district level, then they had a lot of political power. So what I argue is that if Golkar won in your district, then and if you had someone in the government employment in your household, then you were politically connected after the elections. On the other hand, even if you had someone in the government, but Golkar did not win in your district, then that political connection got severed. So you were no longer politically connected after the elections. So that gives you the random variation in political connection due to the different results, due to the different outcomes of Golkar in the 1999 election. Okay, and these are the two main assumptions of which the identification of the effect is based. Right? So we have to think actually about to what extent this actually is the right way to think about what happened in Indonesia. And I will do some checks to make sure that the 2 points I mentioned is actually reflecting, is actually doing what it's supposed to do. So, and how does this work? So let's think about, there will be 4 cases, right? So one, you were either politically connected before the elections or you were not politically connected before the elections, okay? And the Golkar either won in the district or Golkar did not win in the district where you were residing. And so the sample I use is young individuals, so individuals who are less than 24 years old in 1993. So they had already made their human capital decisions before the election. Okay. So if you're connected in the household, your data were the same, right? So you had same unobserved human capital because you were connected prior to the election and you didn't know whether or not Golkar was going to win in the future, right? So your data are the same. So the difference between connected individuals in districts where Golkar won and connected individuals in districts where Golkar lost is because of this continued political connection of the former group, right? So people, if you are in a district where Golkar won, then you should have political power. Whereas if Golkar lost in your district, then you no longer have the political power. But issue is that there might be other differences in the regions that affect your earnings later, right? We know that from research that areas where work are won were not the same as areas where work are lost. So areas where work are won tended to be more rural, for example, right? So the location effect is there. So there might be differences not only because of the different political connection, but also because of regional differences in the districts where work are won and lost. So in order to take into account that factor, we need to take the difference between unconnected individuals as well. So again, unconnected individuals made similar type of human capital decisions before the election, right? So they had this unobserved human capital, and they also had different earnings because of the different regional effect, but they had no political connection affecting their earnings, right? So if you take the difference of those differences, so if you take the first difference between connected individuals in districts where both are won and lost, then we get the effect of the political connection plus any difference in the regional characteristics, right? Now, and if we take the other difference between unconnected individuals, the only reason they have different outcomes is because of the difference in regional characteristics. So if we take the difference in difference, the four-way difference, then we can isolate the value, the actual estimate of alpha, right? So the estimate of alpha is this effect minus this effect, and subtract of this effect and this effect, and we can estimate the value of alpha using this approach. And this is the classic difference in differences approach. There are certain assumptions that are made for this to work, right? So first assumption is that the household should not be able to predict whether or not Golkar will win in your district, right? So if households were able to predict what would happen to if households were able to predict the outcome of the 1999 elections, then they would that would be reflected in their behavior prior to the election, right? So they would make investment choices, and this assumption that the unobserved human capital theta is the same in the two types of districts would be invalid, right? So that's one issue. The second issue is that there might be other changes happening in the labor market because of Golkar's victory. So Golkar, for example, might implement different policies than in the districts that they won, that is not implemented by the government in the other districts, and that might have a direct effect on the labor market outcomes. So that might be another channel through which the election results might be driving the outcomes that we observe, right? So we need to take into account both of these factors. So how do I address this? The first one, I address the first point by controlling for Golkar's sub-district level performance. So the assumption is that if households knew how popular Golkar was in the area, they only knew it up to the sub-district level. They did not know what would happen to Golkar's election outcomes at the district level. So the households would be able to take into account Golkar's popularity in your own sub-district, but they would not know what would happen at the district level. And as long as Golkar's district level outcome is random and does not directly depend on its performance at the particular sub-district, then we can after controlling for the sub-district performance, we can consider the district level outcomes to be random from the household's perspective. Okay, so that's what I do, and also because I'm using unconnected households as the second difference, so I'm taking into account any regional differences that might be existing between regions where Golkar won and regions where Golkar lost, right? So because I'm taking the difference in unconnected households. Now the reason this issue might be a problem is if Golkar implemented policies that specifically affected connected households, right? So Golkar implemented certain policies that would only improve earnings for connected individuals, but not for unconnected individuals. In that case, we would have that would be still problematic. So we might find an effect because Golkar implemented policies that affected connected individuals. 2 points in that. 2 points to note is that first, that would be part of the definition of the value of political connections, right? So if you are politically connected and the government implements policies that only affect you and improve your outcomes, then that's part of the value of political connections, right? The second point is I'll do some robustness check with other definitions by looking at professionals instead of government employees, and I don't find a consistent effect so that kind of helps at least persuade us that not all of the effect that I show is driven by these differential policies of Golkar versus non-Golkar governments. So how do I actually implement that quickly is by running this particular regression. So we have earnings on the left hand side as dependent variable. It's a log of earnings, and on the right hand side I have an indicator variable P, which is equal to 1 if you were living in a household with government employee in 1993. Then we have a dummy variable indicating whether or not Golkar won the highest vote share in the particular district. And there is an interaction between the political connection and the Golkar dummy. And then there are some other control variables like background characteristics that I control for. And this alpha is the interaction between political connection and Golkar's win dummy is what I'm going to estimate the actual value of political connections in this case. So let's discuss the main data sources. So I use the data from the Indonesian Family Life Survey, and I look at individuals who were less than 24 years old in 1993. So by 2007, there would have been there would have been about 20 to 40 years old. And 2007 is when I look at the earnings outcomes. And for connection to Golkar, I basically look at whether there were any household members who had a government job, and the IFLS activity asks everyone to list whether or not they were working for the government. And one good thing about IFLS is that it not only asks about this question to household members who were present at the time of the survey, but also to people who were not in the household at the time of the survey. And this is helpful because, for example, if government employment involved you moving to the district headquarters, for example, then a lot of government employees might be missing from the data if you only had information about present household members, right? So because IFLS asks about both household members who were not present at the time of the survey, this minimizes the measurement error involved with finding out who are connected. So that's the connection variable, and then I have the party-wise vote share data at the district and sub-district level in order to figure out where the districts where Golkar won, and in control for the sub-district performance of Golkar. Okay. And I can also control for household characteristics in 1993, such as per capita consumption, assets, household education, religion, and I also include region and urban dummies in the regression. So just to give you an idea of the distribution of Golkar's election outcomes. So the areas in yellow are the ones where Golkar won by a wide margin, and by wide I mean areas by a vote share margin of more than 10%. So the difference between the Golkar's votes and the next highest vote share was more than 10%. Right? And so those are the yellow areas. The orange areas are the ones where Golkar won by a narrow margin. So those are areas where the difference between Golkar's votes and the votes of the next highest party was less than 10% percentage points. And then the purpose of pink areas are the ones where Golkar lost by a narrow margin, and then the dark pink areas or the purple areas are the ones where Golkar lost by a wide margin. So we can see that there is a huge regional heterogeneity. So there are areas where Golkar won, mostly won. I mean, in Sulawesi, Golkar was the only party that basically won everywhere. In Sumatra, there was some competition, and in Java, Golkar mostly lost the election. Right? So we need to include a regional dummies because we don't want to pick up these regional effects in our equation. Right? So that's one thing, and this is just showing the histogram of the margin. So here it is from minus 0.8, so to about 0.8 positive. So that's the and you can see that most of the data, most of the mass is in the negative side. So there were a lot of districts where Golkar actually did not win the election in 1999. And so, like I mentioned, that's in Sulawesi Islands, the Golkar basically won all the districts, and that means that there is no variation in the sample in those regions. So I exclude that region from the analysis. So I exclude the Sulawesi region because there were no households in this area where Golkar lost the election, and so if I include them, then they kind of there's a regional effect that comes into play, and that might change the result. And then I also, the other thing that we need to make sure is that Golkar's sub-district result does not have a large effect on what happened at the district level. Right? So, and that would not be true if Golkar, if the number of sub-districts in the district were small. Right? So I exclude districts where the number of sub-districts are less than 5. So if there are more than 5 sub-districts, then any one sub-district will not have a big effect on what happened at the district level, and we can consider the effect to be the election result to be random at the district level from the household's perspective. The other issue to think about is the issue of attrition. So basically, so IFLS randomly picked about 4 household members, 4 adults and 2 children to participate in the 1993 survey. And in the subsequent surveys, when these households moved around, they tried to follow those individuals who were initially chosen for the survey. Right? So the attrition rate is much higher for individuals who were not part of the original survey. So in order to solve the selection bias due to attrition, I just basically use the selection into the first year of survey as an instrument for, as a excluded variable in order to correct for any attrition bias. It turns out it doesn't actually make a big difference, but I still try to solve the issues that might arise because of attrition. Let's look at some of the summary variables. So we can see that the number of observations, number of households in the districts where Golkar lost is much higher than the number of households in districts where Golkar won. Right? So there were a lot more districts where Golkar lost than where it won, and the major difference is that the households in districts where Golkar lost tend to be less educated, so they have lesser education, and tend to be largely non-Muslim, largely Muslim households. So the fraction of non-Muslim households is much higher in areas where Golkar lost, and they also tend to be more urban. So Golkar usually lost in more urban areas, and so there are some differences. But remember that what we care about is not the the differences in areas of local loss in one, but the difference in differences. So we don't want households, we don't want the difference between connected and unconnected households to be systematically varying between these two types of districts before the election. And I've done some regulations in order to make sure that this is the case. And there are some other test variables that I use to make sure that before the election, the difference between connected and unconnected households were exactly are very similar in the districts where Golkar won and where Golkar lost. So let's look at some pre-election balance. So first one is looking at the effect of. So the first one is running a regression of per capita household expenditure, of log of household assets, and of household education in 1993 as dependent variables, and running the estimation with connection dummy, with Golkar win dummy, and then the interaction between the two. And then here, to save space, I don't report other variables that I include, for example, the categories of Golkar's sub-district share, region, urban region, urban dummy region base effects. So what we don't want is this interaction to be large, the interaction effect to be large. So we don't want households, we don't want the difference between connected and unconnected households to be systematically different in districts where Golkar won and districts where Golkar lost before the elections. Right? And we can see that. So as expected, we have a very large effect of being connected. So if you had someone in your household working for the government, then you will tend to have about 45% higher per capita expenditure. You tend to have about 100% higher assets and more education. Right? So which is expected because households who are connected tend to be richer and more educated. But what we don't find is any systematic difference between those households in areas where Golkar won and lost. Right? So this interaction effect is negligible prior to the election in all of these for all of these dependent variables, which is a good thing because we don't want there to be any differences. Okay, and so I also look at the human capital decisions of individuals who were aged from 15 to 20 in 1997. So this is from the 1997 round of average surveys. And again, as expected, we find that individuals who had connections tended to be more likely to be staying in school, have a high education, which I define to be having either junior, having senior or higher level of education, and also less likely to be employed. So they're more likely to be in school, for example. Right? But we don't find any systematic difference in these characteristics by Golkar's win, right? So the interaction term again is statistically very small and statistically not different from zero. The only one issue is might be this coefficient here, which is much larger than the coefficient on the connection dummy. But I do a formal test of difference. So what I do is I estimate the marginal effect of being connected separately for areas where Golkar lost and areas where Golkar won, and see whether these are different from each other. And what we should expect is there should be no difference between in these two numbers, and I don't find any statistical difference. Although the difference in employment status is slightly large. The other thing, the other result that kind of points to this idea that politically connected households might invest in better school, in human capital that are not observed in the data, is given by this result here. So what I do is I look at the effect of this. I use as dependent variables the results of the mathematics score and Indonesian language score that the IMF has administered in 1997. So they asked me, we want to take this test. And what I do is I run this regression, and I find that, as expected, connected households tend to score much higher, by about 1 point, in both the language, mathematics and English score, even after controlling for the education level, right? So basically, what this shows is that with even if you control for the education level, there is some effect of being living in a connected household, and this might be because, for example, individuals in a connected household have better resources, so they can invest so that they can spend longer hours earning, longer hours learning, for example. Right? So they might have better knowledge, even if they have the same level of education, for example. Right? So this shows that there might be some unobserved difference between individuals in connected and unconnected household that is not picked up by observational data. And these regressions do include the usual control variables that I mentioned earlier. Okay. So this set of regressions convinces me that there is no pre-election difference. The marginal effect of connectedness is the same in areas where Golkar won and where Golkar lost. So the actual effect of Golkar's victory on earnings is driven solely through this political connection channel. Okay. So now what I do is I take for all the individuals who were aged between 5 and 24 in 1993, I track them to the 2007 year, and I look at how much they are earning in the labor market, right, for those who are employed, and whether or not that earnings is different depending on whether or not Golkar won in your area. And just look at some statistics. So we find that earnings is slightly higher if you lived in areas where Golkar lost than if you lived in areas where Golkar won. There is not much difference in the connection status. So regardless of whether you lived in a district where Golkar won or where Golkar lost, you are likely to be equally likely to be connected, politically connected. The education, so the education is slightly higher if you lived in districts where Golkar lost, right? So you can be more educated, and also this is true for the household level education as well. And again, like considering the earlier descriptive statistics, you are more likely to be belong to a non-Muslim religion if you live in the areas where Golkar lost than if you live in Golkar won. So in one robustness check, I remove everyone who is non-Muslim religion, and that does not really affect the outcome, the main results here. So now let's look at the same regression that I ran earlier, but this time looking at the effect on log of earnings. And so what we find is, so what I do is I first run a basic regression where I just have the connection dummy, the Golkar win dummy, and the interaction between two, and then the basic controls like age, sub-district vote share, mayor, region, urban, and region. That's the first column. The second column, I add background characteristics of the household. For example, like the log per capita consumption, assets, and household education in 1993. So I control for that. In the third column, I remove the household variables and control for your own education. So I look at how much education the individuals have received in 2007. Right? And then in the fourth column, I include both the own education variable and the household background characteristics. Okay? So I run these four columns, and now you can see the first column. We find that there is a positive effect of being connected. Right? So if you live in a connected household, in regions where Golkar lost the election, that's what this first this function is giving you. There's a 24% marginal effect. Right? So if you live in a district where Golkar lost and you were connected in 1993, then you had a 24% more higher earnings. But if you look at the interaction between connected and Golkar win dummy, so now this is the extra earnings that connected individuals in areas where Golkar won make. Right? And you can see that adds an additional 55% to your earnings. Right? So if you are connected and if Golkar won in the district you lived in 1993, then you get an extra 54% on top of the 24% that connected individuals in districts where voter lost made. Okay, so the total effect, if you add them to, so we have about 70% here, the total effect, and the part of the effect that comes from purely from political connection is 55%. Okay, now what I do is I include the household background characteristics. Right? So these characteristics should affect your human capital investment decision in 1993, but it shouldn't affect your political, the value that you get from knowing someone in the government after the elections. Right? So and that's what you get here. So if you control for the household background characteristics, the effect of only being connected disappears. Right? So it reduces from 24% to 2%. Basically what this means is that after controlling for the household background characteristics, there is no additional effect of being connected to of having a government employee in the household in 1993. Right? But if you look at what happens in areas where both are 1, you can still see a big effect. Right? So what this is saying is that even after controlling for your background characteristics, you could still make a lot more earning. You could make 45% higher earnings if you were connected in 1993 and vote by 1 in your district. Okay? So that's what this is saying. And in the third column, instead of controlling for the household background characteristics, I control for the observed human capital, the education variable, and you see the same effect, right? So there is no effect of being connected in 1993 once you control for your own education, but there is still a big effect of being connected in districts where Golkar won the election. Right? So that's about 53% there. And then by including both the variables simultaneously, I still find that about 44% effect of being connected in districts where Golkar won. Okay? So this is the alpha term that I was talking about earlier in the model, and so this means that the effect of political extension is between 44 to 54%. Okay? So this is purely because of knowing someone, so being connected and knowing someone in position of political power, for example, right? And not from any other differences that might be between connected individuals. So remember that. So this regression it contains everyone who was 5 to 24 in 1983. Okay? So by the time the election happened in 1999, some of these individuals had already made all the human capital decisions. So this is the order. So the older individuals had already decided how much education they wanted to get and enter the labor market, whereas the younger individuals were still making some of the younger individuals are still making the decisions, right? So for the younger individuals, their human capital decisions could still be affected by the election outcomes because they were still in school when the election happened. So what they did afterwards, was influenced by what happened to their political connection after the elections. So what I do is I run the same regression but separate out the older and the younger cohort. So what I do is I run the regression for 15 to 24-year-olds separately, and then for 5 to 14 years olds separately. And I have 2 columns for each of the cohorts. In the first column, I don't control for your own education, right? So I will control for observed human capital. And in the second column, I control for observed human capital, and likewise for the younger cohort. So what you find is, again, the results are very similar to what I showed earlier. For the older cohorts, there is a positive effect of being connected, about 36%. But if you're connected and Golkar won in your district, then you get an additional 58%. Right? But remember that these people had already made their education choices before the election happened. So once I control for the education choices, this effect of being connected disappears. Okay? And only what remains is this effect of still being connected after the elections. Right? So if you're still connected after the elections, then you had a 38% higher earnings in 2007. Now let's look at the older cohort. So if you look at let's look at the younger cohort. For the younger cohort, we find that the effect of pure political connection, so being connected in areas where Golkar lost, is actually very small compared to the older cohort. Okay? So all of the effect for the younger cohort comes from being connected in areas where Golkar won. And what this tells me is that a lot of decisions that this younger cohort made depended on what happened in the 1999 election. That's why this connection status in 1993 did not make a big difference for this younger cohort because they were still making their human capital decisions even after the elections. And so the only individuals who get affected are those in areas where Golkar won the election in 1999. And then once you control for your own education, then we have the same result. So the interesting thing is that if you add the total effect of political connection, so you add the effect of connectedness to the connectedness interaction term between connectedness and Golkar win, you get about 44%, which is the same in both the column 2 and column 4. Right? So we have 45% effect of being connected, and which is also 45%. But the difference is that for the older cohort, for the younger cohort, almost all of the effect, or actually all of the effect comes from being connected in areas where Golkar won. But there is no effect of being connected in areas where Golkar lost. Right? So this gives me, so the way I interpret this result is to say that this interaction term is pretty much picking up the effect of political connections that were still intact in areas where Golkar won, but were lost in areas where Golkar lost. Okay? So one concern that you might have is that this result is not given by having a member of a household work for the government, but by the type of jobs that these individuals do. Right? So it's not that being a government employee is driving this result, but since most of the government employees tend to be professionals, it might be the fact that you have a professional person working for the government who might be driving this result. Right? So it might be that Golkar is making policies in the districts that reward individuals with professional connections. Right? And in order to test that, whether that's true, what I do is instead of using political connection as a variable, I use existence of a professional, non-government professional employee in the household. Right? So a dummy takes a value 1 if you had someone not working for the government but with a professional occupation. And then you run the same regression. So this regression is comparable to the first set of regressions that I showed on earnings. And what you see is that this interaction term actually has a negative sign. Right? So if what I just said was true, then we should have found a similar effect that I report in this case. But that's not the case. Right? So at least it gives us some indication that the results aren't driven by the composition of government employees. It's something to do with the connection between Golkar party and government employees prior to the election. Okay? So that's pretty much the results that I have. And just to summarize what we've talked about so far. So I find that being connected to Golkar has large benefits if Golkar happened to win in the districts where we decided. Okay? And I interpret this to be evidence of political connections between government employees and the Golkar party. And if this interpretation is true, then this gives us an indication that there is large segmentation in the labor market in the Indonesian context, at least until 2007. So this segmentation might have driven some of the differences in earnings of those connected and unconnected individuals. And from a more larger literature point of view, this segmentation could bias results for estimates of returns to education. The reason is that if individuals with connections are the ones that are making more education choices, whereas individuals without connections are getting less education, then the difference between the earnings is not only driven by the difference in education or the unobservability, but also because of this connection variable. So we find that there are large returns to earnings in developing countries, but people aren't getting a lot of education. So some have pointed that this might be because of borrowing constraints, for example, or because people don't have the resources to get more education. But there might also be making rational reasons because people without connections cannot get the jobs that require more education and also pay more. So there is settling for jobs that low-paying jobs that do not have a high education requirement. So that's all I have, and I'm happy to discuss any of the points questions that you might have now. So thank you, everyone.